Hi guys, I'm Bruce, I'm a noob. Welcome back to part 3 of my build series on Dragon's amazing Panzer IV L70A, that sexiest of tank destroyers, and it's a buddy build with Panzermeister36 and Adam Mann. Here's where we left off last time. We had the gun, the turret roof, the engine deck, and the hull and suspension pretty much done. Everything went together pretty well, no major drama. I really like the way the gun went together. Check out part 2 for my detailed review of that. But we're making some good progress. Now we're going to start this time putting on the driver's armored vision port here on the front of the superstructure. G33 and 34 do not exist. You can see the correct part numbers there, Q38 and 39. The rear part goes on to kind of hold everything in place, and there's a little slot at the bottom that has to go pointing down so everything else will fit on. You can see it there, that little opening at the bottom of the port. The armored block housing goes on next. There is no glass part called out in the instructions for this. Normally you'd have a glass armored vision block in the middle there, but one is not called for here. And finally we put on the little swivel cover, and that's pretty much done. Now the machine gun port, the coax machine gun, on the earlier, well, the prototype and maybe the very early L70As, this part here, C33, would have been used, but we're using this flat part that goes on over the opening for the coax. There's nothing inside the superstructure to actually allow you to mount a coaxial machine gun. You could probably figure one out if you really wanted to. Now, MA11, these are little sort of foliage clips that go on the outside of the hull all the way around. They're photo etch, and they form, they're supposed to be like a little D shape. You can see they're quite small in terms of the parts. You need 10, they give you 20. Luckily, they're just about the size of the end of my tweezers, so I use those to bend these little bits of photo etch around into roughly a D shape. They're not perfect. Definitely won't stand up under any close scrutiny. I probably should have 3D printed my own. But at the end of the day, we got them on there with a bit of super glue, and everything kind of worked out okay. And again, as long as you don't look too closely, you may not notice that they're not perfect little D shapes. And of course, you get some CA on the end of the tweezers, and nothing fixes that like good old fire. Moving on to the back of the superstructure, you can see we've got the ventilator there. There is detail on the interior, which you might see if you have all the hatches open. So I put it in there. You don't have to. You can just put the exterior parts on if you want. And then this storage bar thing, which looks much too small to be stowing spare track links. Not sure what that is. Let me know if you know what that bar is for. And then finally, the idler wrenches on the L70A are actually stowed on the back of the superstructure rather than on the fenders, which is where you normally see them on a Panzer IV. And there's just very subtle little locating marks molded onto the superstructure. And so just a dab of TET, put them in place, and then some TET to lock them down. So while I haven't had any issues at all with the rest of the kit, my superstructure was actually twisted a little bit. And you can see there the roof isn't sitting flat. So that's not the end of the world. It's easy to fix. And you just basically start at one end, one side, and work your way around, gradually dabbing on TET in a little area, taping it down, and then working your way along. So I started in the front left corner and worked my way first down the left side. Then I worked across the front, making sure I held the superstructure roof in place, and then started working back the right side of the superstructure. And because everything's somewhat flexible, the tape was more than enough to get everything where it needed to be, and that worked really well. Now, the back, there's no positive locating on the sides of the back. It's just a 45-degree miter joint. So in this case, I'm going to tape first. I want to make sure this is exactly where I want it to be, and then we're going to apply the TET on the inside to minimize the chance of any TET wicking in under that tape on the exterior and causing glue marks. And that seemed to work really, really well, but just not ideal. It would have been great if there'd actually been some positive locating built into the back wall of the superstructure. Now, the gun sight and the range-finding scissors periscope on the kit are both made from clear styrene. Of course, we are going to want to paint them, but I'd like to maintain the clear lens that's going to be visible coming out of the superstructure. So just using a bit of that kind of rubbery artist's mask product that you can get at most art supply stores, and I just gradually build it up, and it's great. It has surface tension, so it really pretty much forms a nice natural circle right over where that lens is going to be. And once that's done, then we can prime and paint. So using some Mr. Surfacer 1500 mixed about 50-50 with Mr. Leveling Thinner, we'll prime the gun. I start priming just around the inside of all the openings in the turret roof, just to make sure you wouldn't see any bare plastic peeking through. But then I kind of changed my mind and I actually did the entire interior. just so you wouldn't accidentally see any light gray through the very limited... sorry. Don't you love it when that happens? Thankfully, it's just primer, and it's not something you're going to see. So, yeah, black inside, just to minimize the chance of seeing anything you're not supposed to. And while I had the primer going, I did all those wonderful Panzer IV wheels, just because I figured I may as well get them done now. For the gun, even though you won't see most of it, I used the new formulation of RAL 1001 by AK Real Colors. It's a bit yellow for my mind, but it's pretty good, and it'll do the trick. And then for the periscopes, again, I want to keep the clear parts clear, so I'm using household painter's masking tape. I find that like Tamiya tape or washi tape slides around a bit too much, especially when you're trying to cut it. So I just use this stuff because it's a lot tackier, and it worked well. It'll stay in place until I'm done painting the periscopes. Now, periscopes in German tanks were actually made out of Bakelite, the outer housing was, so it's that kind of red-brown color. So I'm using Tamiya Hull Red XF9, and I'm going to go in later with a bit of a custom mix of kind of a peachy red-brown, I guess, with Vallejo, and just dry brush the highlights a little bit to give it some depth. Now, I probably should have glued Pz.Kpfw, the support for the scissors periscope, to the underside of the roof much earlier before I primed the interior, but no big deal. We'll stick it on there, and P3 is the part number for the periscope that's not called out in the instructions. We're going to use the same liquid artist mask to protect the lenses on the end of the scissors periscope while we paint and weather the tank, and then we'll pull it off when we're done. Now, the Panzer IV L70A had these little sort of tie-downs or foliage loops around the upper sides of the superstructure sides, and the kit gives you these really terrible, just molded on ones. They're not hollow underneath; they're just molded solid up blobs right on the surface, kind of like what you see with the engine deck handles on an old Tamiya kit. They do give you the option of photo etch. You can see part MA12 there, but as we'll see, they're way over scale. So I just went to Fusion 360, built my own little hooks, very simple shapes, and then put about 50 of them onto a sheet and printed them off. It took about an hour and a half to print. Now, about a third of them didn't print. These are very, very tiny, delicate little parts, but I got more than enough to apply them onto the kit. Now, this is, of course, for me, the most nerve-wracking part, is anytime I have to start slicing detail off of a kit. I always worry about screwing the kit up. But it came out okay, no major dramas, and you can see it leaves these little white scars even after it's smooth, so you can see where to put the parts. Now again, these are very small, about 2 millimeters long, less than half a millimeter in diameter, so I just dipped them very gently in a little puddle of super glue, and I really just had to kind of drop them onto the superstructure. And they came out pretty well, actually. Some issue with the supports, I kind of cut off one of the ends of the hook mounts, but there you can see the photo etch piece versus the ones that I made, and absolutely night and day. Those photo etch ones are just so incredibly overscale. They look really out of place. So a big improvement, I think you can see here with proper hooks, and I may actually try to use them to insert some foliage branches or some asparagus fern or something on the model. So that pretty much winds up construction on the gun and superstructure. You can see we've got this gun sight and the scissors periscope in place because you won't be able to get them in place after you seal everything up. So I'm going to have to mask those off when I paint. Here are the little periscopes. They were very tight to fit into those openings, but you can see I've got some sort of highlights on them there, and we'll get that mask off when it's done. And I did paint the sort of top and sides of the gun. You can see I didn't paint the bottom. Just a bit of practice, I guess. And like I said, I actually do kind of like that new Elfenbein formulation. It's not quite as pure white as the old one from AK Real Colors. Now, Panzermeister36, Evan, was very, very, very generous and gave me a set of these Rokem aftermarket resin alternate return rollers. He's been doing some digging. He says he's been told that they were used pretty much right through the end of the war, and I have seen pictures of them on very late Panzer IV Js. With this kit, with the shirts in, you're just really not going to see them, and I just don't want to waste them on a kit where they're not going to be seen. So I'm going to save them for a late J build in the future. And now, like every Dragon build, that moment that you either hate to love or love to hate, it's time for magic tracks. We need 99 links on each side of the vehicle. These are the lighter colored links, so they're the right side. Light equals right, whereas the darker plastic ones are the left side. Now, there are ejector pin marks on the back of most of these magic track links, which is pretty standard for magic tracks. So it's time to just lose yourself in some music or your favorite scale modeling podcast, get in the zone, get your small file out, and just start taking the ejector pin marks off. I'm only going to do about half of them, just the 50 or so that you might see around the idler or the drive sprocket or along the bottom run by the road wheels. So I'll start with about 10 links. I'm going to do all of the filed ones, that is the ones that'll go basically around kind of from the drive sprocket to the idler wheel first. I'll add about 20 onto the back of the run, which will then get me up around the idler to the last return roller, and then the rest of the unfiled ones I'll put on at the front of the run to get up around the drive sprocket and across the other two return rollers to meet the run at the back. And I'll let them set up for about 20 minutes or so. I do the entire run together rather than trying to do it in little pieces. With this kit, one thing I did find a little annoying, there's no post for the drive sprocket to fit on. It just fits into that little round recessed divot there, which meant it did pop off a lot while I was trying to get the track run set up. So a little bit of cursing and swearing, and I'll edit the sound out, and I'll edit for time, because I did wind up frigging around with the first one for about 15 minutes just to get it exactly the way I wanted to. You can see here now, finally, we get it around the drive sprocket. We'll loop it around the bottom. I just had the road wheels loosely fitted on. They tended to pop off as well, again, which is a little frustrating. And finally, that most important tool when you're assembling magic tracks, the Q-tips, to give us that sag we want by wedging the tracks apart from the bumpers in the areas where they would sag. Oh yeah, there's another side, isn't there? All right, here's the dark links, the left side. It actually went quite a bit quicker this time, having just done it for the right side, so we'll just skip ahead. I didn't show it in part one, but before I mounted the Bosch headlight mount onto the left front fender, I did drill out the opening where the wire would go, because I did want to add an electrical wire. It's not provided with the kit, unfortunately. I also glued a hole in the upper glacis just to the right of the right-hand transmission hatch there, and with some 0.4mm copper wire here, we'll gauge how long we want it to be and where the bend needs to go, and we'll just bend it with some pliers and pop it in place with a drop of super glue. Now the instructions show the idler tool on the right rear fender, but they don't have a part number call out for it. It is on the sprues, so no worries there. But you can see here it shows the end as being solid, and on a real idler tool like this, the end was actually hollow. That's so you could insert the idler wrench in there and use the long bar as a lever to adjust the idler tension. So I just hollowed it out with a drill bit and an X-Acto knife. So we're at the end of part 3. Sorry guys, no Schertzen. Just getting all the little details squared away, creating some 3D printed parts. Did delay me a little bit, and I didn't quite make as much progress as I was hoping. But next week we're on to Schertzen, all the final little details, and then of course on to paint, which I'm really looking forward to. It should be kind of fun. So I think Evan, Panzermeister36, is putting his build review of this kit up imminently, so take a look for that. He does the full review, whereas you're getting it in little pieces with me, but hopefully you're enjoying it, and thanks for coming back and following along, guys. Please consider clicking like and clicking subscribe if you're enjoying the series, and more to come next week. In the meantime, I'm Bruce, I'm a noob. Thanks so much for watching. Cheers.